Dive in the deep end, it's time to defend your movie.
Hello, friends, and welcome to this week's episode of Defending Your Movie. I am your host, Jeremy Meyer. So, this is a interesting episode. This is actually maybe like the second or third, probably like the third or fourth episode that I recorded. And just due to scheduling, it's wound up this far down the line just because it's a repeating guest. We are sitting down again with Aerin Moriarty. And I really need to stop saying we. I'm always saying we, referring to me and the guest, but we aren't sitting down with the guest. I sat down with Aerin. And we talked a movie that Aerin is very passionate about, and I had never heard of until it was brought to my attention for this podcast. But we are talking about a movie from the 80s, like a little parody movie called The Pirate Movie, which is something I had never heard of. Like, it has like a 9% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's like not even a movie I think you can really get your hands on anymore. It's actually free on YouTube, which is where I watched it and where Aerin actually recommended me finding it. But the fascinating thing is if you look it up on YouTube and just scroll through the comments of the movie, every comment in there is just the most positive and glowing just beacon of love for this movie. This movie has a huge, maybe huge isn't the right word, has a passionate fan base. Like, people who love this movie love it, and Aerin is one of those people. It was kind of a difficult watch for me. I didn't end up loving it as much as Aerin did, but I was certainly open to it. It did have moments that made me laugh. I also was unfamiliar with it being kind of a parody of Pirates of Penzance, which I had never seen, read, or interacted with in any way, shape, or form. So that was actually something I learned afterwards. But, it's a parody movie kind of in the vein of like a Mel Brooks type movie. Just not made by that caliber of filmmaker, but that it's kind of the perfect movie for this podcast. Something that somebody is incredibly passionate about, and I had never heard of. Like, my favorite episodes are the ones on movies that I've never heard of, and this was most certainly one of them. And, I was worried if it was even going to be a good conversation piece from me, like, watching it, but I think we actually had a really good and fun conversation about this silly movie. So before we get into it, let's get all of our plugs out of the way. As always, we are being represented by The Cryptic Closet, and this is the perfect time. We're in October right now. If you want to get some horror-themed merchandise, maybe some horror parody merchandise, some t-shirts, they got all sorts of stuff over there now. I'm actually going to have to browse and see. Like, I should start recommending some of my favorite products. I have a number of products from The Cryptic Closet. It's actually ran by a friend of mine, Vinny. He's a really great guy, but they have so much stuff that he's selling now. Figures and collectibles, shirts, accessories, glasses, comics, a Fanny DeVito, a Danny DeVito fanny pack, which is the greatest thing ever. So be sure to go over there, pick out some awesome merchandise, and use promo code DEFEND, however you want to say it, at checkout, and you'll get 21% off your order. Also a big fan of the Space Ghost pin that looks like the Batman animated series logo, but it's Space Ghost. I've always loved that. I believe it's available on a shirt as well. But so be sure to check that out. And then, as always, you can follow us on our social medias at Defending Movie on Twitter and Instagram. We have our Patreon at patreon.com/defendingmovie. And our merch store at belowthecollar.com/defendingyourmovie, where you can get some of our t-shirts, some great movie parodies. I'm actually throwing up some new ones here soon. We got The Matrix coming out in a couple months, so I have a Matrix-inspired design, working on a couple other ones. I have a Marvel-inspired design, too, I haven't thrown up yet. I might throw that up as well. I'm also working on kind of probably not going to get up for this year, but maybe come next year, like a spooky version of my logo. For spooky season. So be on the lookout for all that stuff. Go check that out. And without further ado, why don't we go talk about The Pirate Movie? So I have to assume that this was a movie you just saw a lot as a kid. I guess we'll start
No.
there. Really?
The
That is
weird thing is
surprising to me.
I think I was in my early 20s the first time I saw this. I was in film school actually, and I was
Really? And they
dating a
showed this to
guy.
you?
No. I was dating a guy that liked movies, and this was a movie that he liked, and literally this was the only good thing I got out of the relationship. So that should just give you a barometer for the quality of that just whole situation.
Oh, I am so sorry.
Yeah, not one of my proudest moments, that's for damn certain.
Yeah, I this was the first I had heard of this movie.
Yeah.
And I was not aware that it was like kind of like a parody or based on Pirates of Penzance, which
Yeah.
I had heard the name is the most familiarity I have with that.
Yeah.
And I was actually like kind of reading up on that before we started recording, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, it kind of is the same story.
Sort of, yeah. So basically, in the 19th century had a huge love for pirate media and pirate operas and things like that. And Pirates of Penzance was made during that period as like a comic opera, and it's a satire of both like the pirate like opera genre and of like upper class in general. Like just how the blue bloods operate.
Yeah.
Um, so of course in the 1970s you had films like Swashbuckler and Treasure Island came out, and you had like another renaissance of pirate media, and people were like, oh hey, well, like, there was this satire prior to Penzance, so let's 80s-ify that. And basically everything that's in the dream sequence. So this movie, big spoiler alert, most of it's a dream sequence.
Which was like kind of jarring the way it
Yes.
transitions into, because there is no transition. It's
No.
just this girl falls off a boat in the water, and then all of a sudden we're in pirate world.
Yes, pretty
And
much.
there's almost no indication that it's like a dream other than like some of the characters are showing up again. Because
Yeah.
even her character, we don't see in the dream world for like 20 minutes.
Nope.
It's
No.
very strange. It's very abrupt.
Yeah, well, because it's interesting because the movie starts out with just a pirate movie that's being watched. So you start out with like
Yeah.
yo ho pirate stuff, and then it's like click, and then oh, we're watching a movie, and now we're on a beach town.
Oh, which totally
And
threw me off guard. I did not know that was in here, because you said, oh, we're watching the pirate movie. Like, okay. And I kind of did some like just really brief looking into this movie. I'm like, okay, it's it's a pirate movie. All right.
Mhm.
And then when that happened, I was like, oh wait, what are we doing now? I didn't realize that was going to be happening. So I
Yeah.
was really thrown off at first.
Yeah. So everything that happens in her dream sequence is Pirates of Penzance with some I don't quote me on this because it's been a while since I've seen Pirates of Penzance. Because it's not a dream sequence, I think towards the end, the reason the pirates end up yielding is because they bring up the good name of Queen Victoria. I want to say that's the shtick, and they are just such dutiful boys that they're like, oh, Queen Victoria, we couldn't, and so then they're like, we're good now. And then Ruth is like, oh, but hey, by the way, they're aristocrats, and of course, because this is a satire of upper class people, the major general father only cares that his daughters are married to aristocratic men. So he's like, okay, yes, let's marry all of the pirates.
Yeah.
So basically the same movie.
So with the music, I noticed one of the songs was familiar to me, and
Mhm.
I don't know why, and I want to say it was the Modern Major General
Yes.
song.
Did you watch Babylon 5?
I did not.
Okay. So I am the very model of the Modern Major General because it's such a like complicated, challenging song to deliver and memorize.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that's kind of well known outside. I think it's probably more well known in the body of work with with which it's contained. There is a character in Babylon 5 towards the end who has a scene, I think it's Marcus Kane is his name, but it's been a while, don't quote me. And he sings the first line of that, and it's kind of been picked up as like a way to show off that you're really talented, or it's been parodied in a bunch of other media, and I
Yeah.
would say that song's more popular than the work it comes from.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, like, if the music in this, is it kind of the
Mhm.
same songs as Pirates of Penzance, or did they do their own music?
It's like 50-50, and you can kind of hear it in the movie where there's like some songs that are just very 80s, like synth poppy,
Yeah.
and there's some songs that are like like that sound like they're
That's a good
from
point. I
a
did notice that, because I think one of the first songs that comes on when the pirates are all just singing, which was like, okay, I'm kind of into this, was it We Are Pirates or I Am the Pirate King or something like that? Like one of
yeah.
those. I was like kind of into it, and then I was like, oh, so the music's gonna sound kind of like this. Like, okay, that's interesting. And then it never really does again.
Yeah, the Pirate King is, I'm pretty sure that is based off of a song that is in the original. Again, it's been a while, but definitely Modern Major General is, and most of the other songs that are in the film were created for this in this kind of interesting way. It's unique. So one of the main podcasts that I'm on, Film Rescue Show, we fix movies that suck. We take a movie that's bad and we say, hey, these are the things that are bad with it, and here's how we would fix it. And one of the things that I frequently complain about is that when a work is adapted or a sequel is made or a remake or whatever, a lot of times it's very realistic or it's very close to the source or they don't want to take risks. And I love that this takes risks. And that's one of the risks that it takes. And I don't necessarily know how well it pays off. The music is not what I would consider one of my strong points. What I do like is in the Modern Major General song, the first couple of verses are the same, and then in the middle he switches to talking about R&B and S&M and C&W, like he's talking about music and S&M and music again.
Yeah.
And they've basically made modern verses to that old song, which was really impressive, and I loved the way they updated that, and I think I would have preferred with the music that they would have stayed that way. But it was interesting that I can't think of a movie that has ever been like, we're gonna just take two musical styles, one that is 19th century opera and one that is 80s synth pop, and we're gonna just meld them to a degree.
Yeah, and doing 80s synth pop in a movie that feels like it came out of like an older time period is so, like, it reminds
Yeah.
me of A Knight's Tale, how it's
Yeah.
this movie about knights, but it features a lot of modern like rock and roll, which
Mhm.
for that
I love
movie
that movie.
totally works.
Mhm.
And like, I almost wish they just went with like the 80s synth pop for the whole thing. Like, even if you are going to do the same songs, like maybe reorchestrate them in that
Yeah.
style. Like, I think that would have been a little more interesting, other than just
Yeah.
like kind of bouncing back and forth between the two.
Yeah, I do agree with that. The music, I would say, is probably one of the single biggest weaknesses because I just feel like they they didn't mix together enough. They were like, we want to do both of these, but we don't want to completely push it all together. Like when you know how steampunk is a genre.
Yeah.
Okay, this I would call almost like steam pop, sort of, because you've got these whole the whole film I would say is called like steam pop because it's like Victorian but also 80s, and the music I wanted to see go the same way.
Yeah. And
Bec-
that's why it kind of piqued my interest when the music first
mhm,
started. Because I
yeah.
could already tell, like, oh, this is maybe not going to be a movie I love, like, as soon as the movie started.
Oh,
But when the music kind of started, I was like, okay, I could get into this if this is how it's going to be. And then
mhm.
that's not how it is. And
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of switches and a lot of change ups, and it's I wonder how much of that. Obviously, I am not the original creator, and there's not very many like interviews about this movie.
Oh, I'm surprised.
I wonder how much of that is attempting to be like a reference to like one of the ways that Pirates of Penzance and by extension this is a like makes fun of the tropes of the genre is Frederick and Mabel, they meet each other and they just fall in love. They just
Yeah.
see each other and they're just making
There's
out.
which is actually one of the lines I do like in the movie, where it's like right when they meet each other, she's just like, "Damn, that was a quick love scene."
Yes.
Which those
Yeah.
were the moments that were kind of grabbing me. I was like, "Oh, this feels like somebody's trying to make a Mel Brooks movie and just
Yeah.
not doing it as well."
Exactly.
But there's not many moments like that in the movie.
I think so. Here's the thing. Here's the intrinsic problem with satire. In order to really appreciate satire, you need to have a fairly solid knowledge of the underlying media. If you don't understand pirate movies and pirate operas from back in the 19th century and the tropes of that and like other tropes of media with like aristocracy and how nobility work, most of the jokes fall flat. There's actually a decent amount of wit in it, but a lot of the wit, like I'm curious. There's a joke at the very beginning where Frederick comes to land and he's surrounded by women, and um like a headband or something like that falls off one of the girls, and he picks it up and there's a flower on it, and he says, "Oh, I didn't mean to deflower you." Does that
That might
joke
have
land?
I like it. I get it. I think that might have went past me. So I will say I watched this on YouTube, and the
Yeah, it's
audio quality on the YouTube version is awful. It's very quiet, and it was kind of hard to hear
yeah.
some stuff. So
I
that might have missed me. But like you saying that to me, like, oh, I get it. It's like a funny joke.
yeah. And there's this whole Mabel's speech at the end about how her corsets are choking and constricting and
Yeah,
she won't be choked by duty, and I see you throbbing, and I think definitely not being able to hear and understand. I suffer from not having closed captioning
yeah,
because I'm very ADHD, and for me, hearing words doesn't process. My audio, my ears are for music. They don't do words as good as
yeah,
I would like for them to. So I really do benefit most from captions. Unfortunately, the only way that I know of to get this movie is YouTube.
yeah. I
The
honestly didn't even look to see if it's like
very
available
shit quality.
anywhere.
It's not. I mean, there may be like a DVD. I doubt there's a DVD. There may be like a VHS release of this, but it's not on any streaming services, and they didn't bother to do anything to preserve the licensing or rights to it, which is why it's just freely available on YouTube. Like even the songs that were made original for the thing don't seem to be getting copyright claimed on YouTube. So
Yeah.
that's interesting. It's
Well, good
sad
news.
because
It has a $60 DVD on Amazon,
oh, whew,
or a $30 VHS tape, which apparently Amazon
oof,
still sells VHS tapes.
oof. I think, and obviously I've watched it a bunch of times. There's a fair bit of wit in the dialogue, and definitely if you don't hear it, it doesn't fall. And if you don't understand the tropes, they don't fall either.
Yeah, so I am a fan of pirate stuff, but I've actually
Hmm.
not seen a ton of pirate movies like outside of more modern ones.
Yeah,
So
and
like
modern
I
ones are very different.
very much so. And like it's one of those genres like, oh, I should go back and watch like a bunch of them, but like when they were big in like the 70s and 80s and stuff, I have not seen a lot of those. Like
Yeah.
what's the big Gina Davis movie that was like a huge bomb or whatever?
Oh, fuck. I know what you're talking about,
Yeah.
and I cannot think of the name of the movie.
Now I gotta look it up.
But I
Cutthroat Island.
oh, yep, that's the one. When I was a kid, like, obviously, Hook I came out when I was fairly young,
Yeah, and
so
that's
that
one
was
we actually just talked about on the podcast.
yeah, it's a great movie, and I was into movies that had swashbuckling themes, so I was into Three Musketeers, which is why I fixed that for Film Rescue. I was into, shit, what's the other, sword fighty type thing that I was in? I was into
Count of
Zords
Monte Cristo?
No, I was into Zorro
Yeah.
to a degree, and then there's one more thing.
Those are the big ones that I can think of.
It was in the 80s. I don't know. Anyway, I was really into sword fighting when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So, like the pirate, even though I didn't really. Oh, Robin Hood.
Oh,
A lot
yeah.
of the old
Duh.
Robin Hood movies that he fought with a rapier. So I was into a lot of those old Robin Hood movies. So I started watching, Errol Flynn was a lot of those. So I watched a lot of the old pirate movies. And I think because of that, and because being a theater kid, I knew of Pirates of Penzance before I had seen the pirate movie. And I knew and appreciated what they were trying to do. So I think it's a little bit different when you kind of, oh, I see what they're trying to do. It fell flat, but they made an attempt, and I appreciate that. So that, I think, was why I was allowed to appreciate it at an older age, and why I think the film has this film is like, I think its Rotten Tomatoes is like 9% for critics versus like 91% for
It's
people. That
such a huge difference.
it's
Yeah.
it's one of the biggest I've ever seen, and I think if you're really into this type of movie and you're not the sort of person who, I think a lot of people need realism in their form. Like, they
Hmm.
they they want the rules of cinema to be followed. They don't want meta, they don't want fourth wall, they don't want anything like that. They just want something fairly realistic, and this is not that. The filmmaking elements are very in your face. They want you to know that you're watching a film. Honestly, I think they want you to feel like you're in a theater.
Yeah. And I think some of the fourth wall breaking stuff for me was the things that I actually liked.
Yeah.
Like that line was like,
Yeah.
oh, that was a quick love scene. Like how they're acknowledging how ridiculous like most of this stuff is.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I said, that was the stuff that made me feel like it was an attempt at like a Mel Brooks style movie, because you see a lot of that in his movies as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I would love to see the Mel Brooks version of this, because I think that
Oh
would
yeah.
absolutely be phenomenal. And I know that if Princess Bride would not have come out 4 years later,
Yeah.
that this movie would have gotten, I think, more credit, because it's hard to look at things like the things that Mel Brooks was doing at that time period and look at Princess Bride, which, I mean, it's not pirates, but it's swashbuckling, which
Yeah,
is
it's
similar.
in the same vein.
Exactly. It's sword adventure. I mean, most of this doesn't take place at sea, so I don't necessarily think that it needs to be pirates. I think if Princess Bride wouldn't have kind of done something similar to what this was doing, but better,
Yeah.
which is take a satire of the genre, that this would have shown through more.
Yeah, because I do think there are like things about this movie to look at. Like I think the cast is pretty decent for
Yeah.
what it is. Like the three main like lead characters.
Well,
Uh
Christy McNichols is a goddess among humans.
she's great. I've never seen her in anything else.
I'm trying to think about that. What else she's been, and the funny thing is, everybody, like all of her fans, are mad at this movie for her being in it, because I don't know if they thought she was going to do something better at that point in time. She was on Empty Nest for a while, and she was in Little Darlings, and she was in a TV show called Family. So like, I think that you're probably a little bit too young to have been like, Empty Nest was even a bit too, it's like I'm on the cusp of being too young for liking that show.
Yeah.
So like her fans hold this movie against her or something.
I mean,
I
hey, you
also
never know
think,
when you're doing something, you know?
yeah, yeah. And I also think that this suffers from the classic movies with female protagonists targeted at teen girls tend to get a worse rap than they deserve.
Yeah. And there is this kind of like women empowering thing to the movie I
Yeah.
was noticing, which is for its time period is
Mm-hmm.
definitely stand out.
Yes.
Like the only thing I can think of in the 80s doing something like that was like Aliens.
Yeah, and it does it in a really good way. So before I talk about Mabel, I want to talk about Frederick real quick, because I love that he's just this big ass fucking himbo, and it's one of the biggest reasons that I love him.
Yeah.
And I just want to establish that character trait. He is the world's biggest himbo, to the point where his duty and his honor is like, he's so value. And so he's supposed to be done his pirating career at 21 years of age, but he was born on a leap year.
Which is
And
a funny gag.
I
With
love that gag.
like, oh,
Especially with
technically
the
you're still in service of us.
yes. I love the huge contract and everything. And because he signed the contract and he's such a good boy, he's like, oh, well, I guess I'll see you in 1940.
Yeah.
And
Which
that's
I
what
was
they,
reading about Pirates of Penzance, and that's pretty much how that ends.
yep, pretty
I was just like,
much.
oh, okay, so that just goes for it versus this has a much different ending.
Yeah, yeah. The ending is it's not the ending that I would have gone with, but I'm glad that they went with a happier ending than that. I love that his negative trait is just that he's so pure of heart because it really frees her up to be this incredible character. So basically, because he's in this contract, he ends up becoming a pirate again, even though he thought he was done the pirating life and he was going to move on with Mabel. And when the pirates try to attack her father and family for lying about being orphans, which I love that all of the stakes in this are just like everybody's getting murdered over things like I lied about being an orphan. But I
Yeah.
digress. Um, you Frederick is allowed to be this bad guy for like, I don't know, a full almost act of the film. And yet he's a very sweet, loving, kind bad guy. And Mabel just gets to be this like really aggressively feminist character who, she sword fights and she's witty. She has this interaction. They need to get this treasure map off of the Pirate King's back, and she,
Oh god,
you
that
know,
whole sequence is just absurd.
it's so funny. I love that sequence because you could have just done the oh she seduces him like a lot of movies would have done that. They just seduce her, but she just makes this whole like game over like like turning off the candles and like blindfolding him and all of these like different things and like dodging out of the way and she's both clever and she's physically adept and she's pretty and one of the things that I love about her is like her self-assessment is body is a 10 the brain body is an 8 the
Yeah.
brain's a 10.
That line did get me. It was pretty funny.
I love that.
Yeah, and just like
And
making him like flex over and over again until he's literally
mhm,
just like tired.
yes, yes, the guys in this are such himbos and the girls are like Ruth and Mabel are the brains of the operation. The Pirate King, he's just pretty and he wants to like have like a good time, I guess. And he feels bad for orphans, so he takes them in. It's a little bit of a
Yeah.
problem when you make the kids orphans before you take them in, but
Yeah,
he's
it's a
trying.
weird arc. Like that's his whole thing. And then like on top of it, everybody in this movie is just horny. Like
Yes,
all the like this is a very horny movie
it's
for its
so
time
horny.
period.
It's this is like this is the cheesy TikTok. This is perfect for like the TikTok fucking generation. I swear. Like if they so long as they know the genre well enough to understand the satire and stuff like that, the whole idea of just, oh, you want me to flex for you? I'm just gonna take off my shirt and flex and allow Frederick to get the treasure map that's on
Yeah.
my back. And when she says and then that scene finally resolves with the lights are out, she kind of sneaks out and Ruth sneaks in and the Pirate King ends up sleeping with Ruth, and at the very end he's like, well, I want to marry the woman I had sex with, and Ruth is like, okay, and he's
Yeah.
like, well, all right.
All right. He's
Everyone is
like
true to their word even though like they're scoundrels.
yeah. But like one of the things I kept bumping into is just like things just kind of happen in this movie. Like he's
Yes.
he's on the boat and he's like, "Oh, your contract is up. You've been a pirate
Mhm.
all this time. What do you want to do?" "Well, I want to hunt pirates." It's just like, "Oh, okay." And they just kind of like throw him in a boat and he ends up on the first island he crosses on, and then the pirates show up at the same island. Well, it's like, didn't you just throw him off the boat? Were you just like
Yes,
following him? Like, why is
pretty
everybody
much.
just showing up here?
Yeah, and again, I think that's the Pirates of Penzance referring to the fact that in a lot of pirate operas, there's a lot of coincidence more
Yeah.
than actual skill. Which I love the modern Major General. Like he's really good at like singing, but I don't get the vibe that he's actually accomplished.
No, they don't show you that at all.
He's just a giant wussy.
Yeah, and
He's
he's
another
he's
himbo.
even when they get the treasure, which is just an absurd scene of her singing on the boat while he just walks around this very crude like underwater set.
Mhm.
They get the treasure and he's just like, yeah, but they'll probably just steal it again. Like whatever.
Yeah. I think that's very charming. It's definitely it appeals to a younger audience, and I think it was definitely designed that way. It feels like something that was made for young women, and obviously, well, I haven't brought it up yet. I'm assigned female at birth, but I do identify as gender fluid, and I feel that I this movie, one of the reasons that I love it is because while the world wanted me to be the like Mabel that's like the strong empowered genius, there's just this huge element of my personality that is the Major General. There's that's the Pirate King, that's Frederick. Like there's just huge aspects of me that are just fucking himboville. I love how it's almost like the Mummy, where it's like one of those aggressively bisexual friendly casts.
You talking about the 99 one?
Yeah, the 99 one, not the
Oh
bad
yeah,
one.
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of has that vibe for me too.
Yeah, I could totally see. And swashbuckling like adventure movies, that is the one of our generation, I would say.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
that was the movie that made me interested in movies.
It's that was just so transformative for me in many ways. Obviously, oh my god. The Mummy 2, that whole fight between oh yeah.
Yeah.
That changed something in me.
that
Like the
that was
whole
like a birthday movie for me. It's like, oh, because that's my thing
oh,
on my birthdays. I always go see movies, and I'm pretty sure I saw that one on my birthday.
they were just so incredibly good. I feel like I love that swashbuckling is one of those things that every generation has swashbuckling films. Now we have Pirates of the Caribbean. I do wish that Disney would let Pirates of the Caribbean lie and would
Yeah.
do other swashbuckling things. Unfortunately, like a lot of the takes recently on like Three Musketeers have been terrible. Like a lot of the similar like Robin Hood, they've been trying to do more serious takes recently.
Yeah. Like,
They
what
don't
was the last good like swashbuckling adventure movie? I feel
yeah.
like there hasn't been one in a very long time.
I mean, when was the last good Pirates? Maybe
The
3?
third one.
Yeah, and that was still I don't know. Like, there's things that I like about the 3rd one, but I would say that the 2nd one is probably the last one that I would consider, like, objectively good.
I saw the third one in the theater and I remember like I was like, oh, that was terrible. And then I saw it later and I was like, oh, I just maybe wasn't paying enough attention. Like I really like the first three. And
Hmm,
then that newest one has moments, but
yeah,
I just kind of forget about the series after the third one.
yeah.
But yeah, like that Tom Cruise Mummy, I would not put in that category at all. It was trying to be too many different
Ugh,
things, and
yeah, that was gross.
like it's one of my favorite genres of film, and I feel like it's kind of dying out.
I love swashbuckling because there's something and this film obviously brings it out, there's something inherently sexual about sword fighting. Like, would
Yeah.
you agree with me?
Oh, very much so. And I would also argue that what's it called? We were just talking Princess Bride also
Mhm.
kind of plays in that realm of,
Yes.
even though it's like Wesley and Inigo like fighting, there's just something very
Mhm.
intimate about their fight.
And my friend JD and I, we have this concept. It's heterosexual movies that are actually very queer. And I mean, it's not just like our concept, but like we have just
Yeah.
an entire list of films that are heterosexual movies that are just very queer. Like a lot of swashbuckling films end up on that list. And it's interesting because this movie unfortunately falls into the pitfalls of just being in the 80s, and it does have a little bit of homophobia where she's like, are you gay? Like
Yeah,
makes
but on that point, I would say watching the opening scene with all the pirates and stuff, I got a very gay feeling about all the pirates.
yes.
I was like, oh, everybody on this ship is probably just fucking.
Yeah. It was one of those things where like she asks him if he's gay, and it feels weird and an odd side of the time things, but also it feels like it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Like, it feels like, oh, no, this is just the way we are.
Yeah.
Like, it's what you do when you're out at sea.
And there's a scene at the very end where Mabel is matching up with her sisters with the various pirate guys, and she matches two like pirate dudes together.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I got that impression from it, and I wasn't sure if it was intentional or not.
Yeah, what I love is how all of the pirates act very sexual, but it seems like like I don't think the way they act, it seems like they have not had sex, and it doesn't also feel like anybody else has had sex with Ruth, which is entertaining
Yeah.
because everybody's just so sexual. I love the way they play with that. I want to also bring up deliberate campiness really hasn't been done and done well since Austin Powers.
Yeah.
The
Uh,
large majority of deliberate campiness you see nowadays is either in like YouTube shorts and stuff like that or on TV. I hate that.
yeah, I can't think of like,
It's because of the Scary Movie franchise that fucking
oh
ruined
yeah.
everything.
Yeah, like that entire like parody genre of just,
Mhm.
well, because it was at one point it wasn't even jokes. It was just, oh, we're just throwing in pop culture references, and that's
Yeah.
supposed to be funny.
Yeah, it was
But
almost like they were trying to compete with memes but didn't realize that they were a movie.
yeah, like
Yeah, that's
even
not
like
right
the
vibes.
first two scary movies I'd say are still like pretty good, but like you go back and watch Scary Movie 2, and there's a whole joke about a basketball commercial from that time
Yeah.
period. It's like, who's gonna understand that now?
Mhm. Yeah, there's
A good example, actually. So last night I recorded an episode for the movie Clue,
Yeah,
and
that's a
we were
great
having a.
movie.
It's fucking so good, and we were having a conversation about a lot of that humor. Most like 99% of that humor still works because a lot of the humor is based on just like language and like the way they talk to each other and the way they interact
Yeah.
with each other, and there's not really anything relative to the time period. It's just,
Yep.
no, these people being goofy.
Yeah. And in just the best possible ways. I love the character interactions in that movie, and I love it's I love satire because it allows you to make a character who is an archetype, who is 100% true to archetype and pretty much doesn't grow, and the movie is better for it and not worse.
Yeah.
I love how, like, Frederick's whole twist is just that he's running away from piracy, and in so many scenarios in that kind of situation, you have, like, you're running towards a life of piracy because it's, like, freedom from whatever, you know, shit you were gonna be doing on land. Maybe you were supposed to be in jail. Maybe you were, really, really poor and didn't have any other options. Maybe you were supposed to marry somebody you didn't wanna marry, so you're like, "Fuck this shit, I'm out."
Yeah, and like his whole thing is that he's kind of just looking for love,
Yeah.
but doesn't even really know what love is.
Mhm.
And just the first island of women he finds, he just rows towards it.
Yeah. I like, one of the scenes between Frederick and Mabel at the beginning where he says Frederick without a K, and she says Mabel also without a K. We have so much in common.
That's good.
It reminds me of, Anna and Kristoff from Frozen, and I feel like there's a lot of interesting things that, like, when that happened in Frozen, people were like, "Oh, this is so cool, like, I've never seen, like, Disney flicks don't do this, you don't have a female character do this." I feel like Mabel is such a underrated feminist character who is kind of in a movie that is awkward, that isn't necessarily straight. You kind of have to have some backstory with movies to understand this. This is not Luca. You can't watch this movie knowing literally nothing about movies and have an enjoyable experience. Well, I mean, maybe, but I would say that's probably the exception and not the rule. This is one of those inside jokes for people who like inside jokes films.
Yeah. And she is kind of the only one that really stood out to me in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like the cast. Like the other two, the Pirate King and Frederick, were fine,
Yeah.
but I feel like they're kind of underwritten. And
Yes.
she, like, it feels like a movie that was almost made for her, and that she gets all the best stuff. And
You know,
it's
it
it's
wouldn't
just
surprise me.
interesting. Yeah,
It would not surprise me because obviously, Christy McNichol, gorgeous, very talented. She was the most capable of the actors. One of the things I think that I like about this movie is because there's so little from the actual production. There's not like behind the scenes DVD features. There's no, 30, 40 years of interviews of people that had worked on it and things like that. You can really interpret it in any way that you want, but there's also like, was this designed as like a star vehicle for her? Was this designed deliberately to appeal to teenage girls? And I mean, those two can happen at the same time. Like
yeah.
what exactly was the aim? This had a $6 million budget, which is actually surprisingly high to me.
That's not insignificant, and it only
Yeah,
pulled in like 9 million or something.
yeah, it made 7 domestically, which
Ugh.
is not great. Did not make much internationally at all. So, like, I'd really love to know what the discussions going into this film were like. Because Pirates of Penzance isn't quite as like, super feminist. And I think part of it is just being in the headspace of a teenage girl and all of that entails, which I love. And I love what it says about Mabel's character, that while she's shy, like the Mabel that we see at the beginning is very shy. She's got glasses on, she's got frumpy clothes, people make fun of her. She's not the aggressive feminine icon that Mabel in the fantasy is. But it's kind of nice to see that she's got this fantasy self image of herself that is so strong and so powerful. And so, yes, I would like a man. I would like to fall in love, but like not to fight my battles, like just to be in love with. Like the only battle that they really fight together is, oh, dad says I can't marry you because you're poor. I'm going to help you get money so you can
Yeah,
not be poor.
yeah. It's so bizarre. Like, it's all just like kind of tailored into, like, she's like, oh well, I'm just gonna do whatever I can to have us end up together because that's what's supposed to happen.
Mhm.
Yeah, I do,
And I love
because
how they pull that out. I love how they point that out.
yeah, and it is interesting because even most movies on like a Wikipedia thing have like a production
Yeah.
section where they kind of talk about how the movie came together. This has nothing.
Nothing.
Like, browsing through the IMDb trivia, it's just a lot of talking about the music and the actors and stuff. No real mention of like how this came to
Yeah.
be. And so
Yeah.
this was an Australian movie, and I do
Yep.
wonder if maybe that plays into like just the
Yeah.
way some of how it all came out to be.
Yeah. And Pirates of Penzance isn't really big in the United States. And it's more of a British thing. Like a lot of my British friends are familiar with that. And the people that I've recommended this movie to who generally like it are people who are British and into the film scene. And I think some of the like wit and humor is more of that, and that more of that like British, like drier wit, and like a lot of the social commentary. Like the father is more concerned about the fact that these people are not noble blooded. He doesn't really care so much that they're pirates. He's
Yeah.
more concerned about the fact that they're noble blood. And as soon as they're like, oh well, they just all were orphans that they didn't have anywhere to go, and they just end up pirates. But they're noble still. They're like,
Yeah.
okay, well you can marry now.
Yeah,
Love
it's
that.
very superficial about the whole thing.
Hmm. Yes, I think that is a good theme about the whole movie is just superficiality. You meet somebody and you're like, "Oh, you're pretty. Let's marry."
Yeah.
And they establish very clearly the only woman that Frederick had ever known before was Ruth. He had been on the sailing vessel since he was 1 year old, and he sees the girls that shit Mabel is with initially on the beach, which, like, I don't know, 12 girls that are in Victorian swimwear, so they're pretty heavily covered, and they've got, like, bonnets and umbrellas and shit like that. And then he sees her, and she's wearing, like, something that Daryl Hannah, was that her name from Splash?
I am unfamiliar with Splash.
The mermaid movie. What in the hell is that mermaid movie?
Daryl Hannah was in Splash. If that's
Yes, Daryl Hannah Splash.
Yeah.
It looks like kind of something that she would wear. It's just like a off the shoulder, short white dress that does not leave much to the imagination. It's fairly revealing
Yeah.
for a boy that's never seen girls before.
Yeah, which they make a lot of references like, hey, are you still a virgin and stuff? And he just like brushes off the answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is funny because it's obviously Ruth is not interested in him until he's 21 and not a pirate, and she's like, oh, now you're okay. So it's like, oh, he is obviously not slept with Ruth. So again, more of those just jokes about gay pirates.
Yeah, that's insane. I got a lot of vibes of gay pirates at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah. I think because it's the 80s, unfortunately, they had to put a little bit of a dumb joke in there that wasn't funny, but
yeah. I would argue there's a lot of that.
That's fair. There is some racial humor that is not aged very well. I have to admit to that. But that's
like every movie from the 80s.
Yeah, nearly every movie from the 80s. I have to cringe at least 3 scenes nowadays.
Yeah. Already like 4 movies I've talked about for this podcast. It's like, well, there's this thing that not anymore,
Yeah, I feel like I'm not one of those people that believes that a film should just be canceled because it has undesirable content, like within reason. Like if it's really undesirable, like
if it's like out there to be hateful or something like that. But like a lot of movies, like, hey, that was the time period. I laughed at it then. I'm just as guilty. Yeah. Like we just have to understand this is how things have changed.
Well, I like the Looney Tunes idea. I believe that ignoring these films and things like that, it sanitizes it. It makes it easier for people to be like, oh, America hasn't been racist since 1865. What are y'all talking about? Sanitizing all of that history and pretending it doesn't exist, it just makes it easier to do that. I want to see companies do what Looney Tunes did. Say, yo, we fucked up. Like, this was not okay. But at the time, we thought it was, and we're sorry for that.
I am not a big fan of editing someone's face. Yeah. But like someone editing art. A more recent example is that TV show 13 Reasons Why, which features a very graphic suicide scene. And they took it out like eventually on Netflix because like people were complaining about it. And I'm like, that is not the right way to approach that, because for one, the suicide, it's not like glorified, which that was the fucking argument they were trying to make. It's like, no, this is showing how horrible this actually is and how it affected everyone in the lives of that show. Just put a warning up, just put something up, put a phone line to the suicide hotline or something. Don't just like rip that out.
Here's my hot take. As someone who has been in the psych ward for trying to kill themselves, here's my hot take about 13 Reasons Why. I would say that the only part of that entire show that would actually count as a deterrent would be that awful fucking scene of her dying. And that the rest of it, this whole, if you kill yourself, everybody's gonna like suddenly think about you different and realize all the things that they treated you wrong and how horrible they were the entire time you were alive. Dude, that is dangerous talk for suicidal people. There are a lot of people that are on the brink that is what they want. They want their legacy preserved. They do not care about their life. And I really think the show in general is the problem, not that scene. And why Netflix doesn't understand that problem is beyond me.
Yeah, and ripping that out is not the way to deal with it.
Yes,
just
I agree.
Like Looney Tunes, like as offensive as that stuff is, they're like, hey, we're gonna show it to you, but we're just gonna let you know that, like, hey, we're sorry.
Yeah, I think that people need to be more robust about giving warnings and content, and people need to be more robust in making sure that the content they and the people that they're around are consuming is appropriate. Like is it, and I'm not like saying that like, oh my god, parents, make sure your kids aren't watching this, but like if your kids are watching 13 Reasons Why, educate yourself on what content is there, and talk to them about it.
Yeah,
Use it as a communication thing.
and don't be afraid of it. Like, art should be challenging in one way or
Yes.
another. Like, something like 13 Reasons Why, because it brings on the challenging conversation of like suicide, to even something like as mundane as like The Last Jedi challenging what a
Yeah.
Star Wars movie should be. Like
Yeah.
there should be something in the art that is like starting a conversation. Granted, not everything. Some things can
Yeah.
just be your blockbuster shoot 'em ups and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But like if you're gonna go for it, and just kind of take the
Yeah.
precautions you need to take.
And I think that's one of the reasons, to kind of segue back into the original conversation.
Yeah, how did
One of
we
the
even get
reasons,
onto this?
yeah, one of the reasons that I liked this movie so much is they do challenge a lot of different things. I mean, a lot of movies, even like this movie says, like makes it pretty clear at various points. Like I think once Mabel shows back up again, it's clear, okay, it's a dream sequence or something fantasy related.
Yeah.
And I think once that becomes clear, there's a lot of movies that keep their dream sequences fairly realistic. But this is a teenage girl in this movie came out in 82. It would have been filmed in 81. So in her sword fighting scenes, there's a Star Wars reference. There's fucking lightsabers.
Yeah, which is like, that's a scene where, because the movie never gets super hard. Again, that feels like a Mel Brooks thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like it feels out of place in this movie because the rest of it doesn't go as outlandish as that lightsaber scene does.
Yeah, I have a feeling that a lot of their budget probably ended up going to that. But I want to point out that this movie came out 5 years before Spaceballs did.
Oh, that's crazy to think.
And I think I saw this movie before I saw Spaceballs. I don't know how that ended up happening. I just, for whatever reason, my dad was my gateway into Star Wars, and my dad never really liked Spaceballs, so it wasn't something that I really watched. And like, I guess one of my friends really showed it to me. I was like in my late 20s the first time I saw Spaceballs, so seeing this first and understanding that this came first, it feels more revolutionary. I can't think of anything before 1982 that did a lightsaber fight reference that actually did lightsaber graphics.
Yeah, and honestly, it looked pretty good too.
Yeah. For a movie that didn't come out of Hollywood, didn't come out of a major studio, didn't have like an enormous budget.
Joke.
Exactly. It's just like a one-off gag. I do think that that's probably where a lot of their budget and time went.
And it's funny because I don't even think he uses it. Like I think he like ignites it and then just immediately is knocked out of his hand. So it's literally just there for a joke.
Yeah, it's just a gag.
And a scene where the Pirate King just like shows up out of nowhere and they just start fighting.
Yeah, you just have this kind of like no holds barred sort of. I think the film would have benefited from being a little bit longer, because I think what they're trying to convey with the whole, oh, we're showing you a pirate movie, then we're showing you Mabel at this like beach resort watching this boy sword fight, and then, oh, now we're Mabel's fantasy. I think what they're trying to say is like, okay, here are all of Mabel's inspirations and like all of the struggles that are part of her normal life. And I think they trusted themselves to get that point across too easily, or they just didn't have enough footage, which, I mean, it could be the latter. We don't know, because who knows?
Nobody's talking about the movie anymore.
Exactly. It sucks, because I think, like I said, Spaceballs came out after this. A lot of Mel Brooks stuff came out after this. A lot of Monty Python stuff came out after this. A lot of good satire came out after this. And most people, the things that are interesting about the pirate movie, they've seen other movies do after this.
Yeah. I mean, this movie crawled so those other movies could run, maybe.
Yeah. pretty
I mean, it all
much.
had to start somewhere.
Yeah. So I mean, all in all, like I'm not saying that this is like an amazing movie, and I'm not saying
Well,
that
here's
it's
a
for everyone.
question. Is
Mhm.
it a movie you legitimately enjoy or like a
Yes.
bad movie that you think is fun?
Yes.
See, that's interesting.
Why?
That is interesting. Just for me, I've just never been one of those people. So I did get the impression that maybe this was a movie kind of not at the level of The Room or something like that, but like a movie that people loved because like, oh, it's like a movie that's so bad it's kind of fun. And
There's parts of it that are that, but I actually like I mean, I like Pirates of Penzance. I mean, I'm not like an expert in it, but like the couple of times that I've seen it, I enjoyed it. I
Mhm.
know enough about the source material to like appreciate the references to it, and I've seen a shit ton of swashbuckling. So like I consider the dialogue to be fairly witty. It's not, like, laugh a minute funny, and it's
Yeah.
not, like, Princess Bride, but, like, I do think that, like I said, Mel Brooks, Monty Python, Princess Bride, things like that have set the bar for films that do stuff like that pretty high, where people are expecting, like, almost joke a minute type antics, or, like, Austin Powers had so many, like, heavy visual gags and stuff like that, which aren't as attainable when you don't have great budget.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I would say that I kind of like it for both reasons, both because I see what they were trying to do, and I recognize that they didn't you know, they shot for the moon, and they made it into the upper atmosphere, and
Yeah.
that's more than what most people will do. Most people don't even try. Most people make safe attempts. Like, most people are like, "Oh, well, I don't wanna risk getting stuck in the stratosphere, so I'm just gonna fly to Las Vegas instead because that's easy money."
Yeah. So it's more rewarding the craft than necessarily the
Yeah.
final product.
I
That's
I
fair.
appreciate that. I like, one thing that really frustrates me is just Disney and their formula films. They're kind of take just enough risks to maximize the amount of money we're making
Yeah. It's true.
without actually making a good movie
And then like the
or an
the
amazing well, oh, okay, Disney does still make good great
for obvious,
good
yeah.
and great movies. They don't make the type of movie like, the last movie out of Disney that just, like, really made I would say Pirates of the Caribbean, but honestly, just kinda because I wasn't expecting it, was the last movie that made me like, "What well, damn, Disney," because like, before that was the first time Disney had PG-13 teeth under the Disney logo.
Yeah.
And they just really have gotten fairly comfortable since, like,
Yeah.
once they realized that, like, the key to life is just maintain intellectual property rights as long as possible, and then try and make as much money as possible off of that. They identified this formula of how to hit exactly the type of emotional beats that need to be taken to kind of have just enough diversity that you won't have the left wingers going completely crazy, but not so much that the right wingers aren't willing to take their kids there. And you have to keep it within bounds because you don't want to upset China because there's a lot of money in China.
Oh my god, yeah.
Like, Disney just balances this complicated formula of filmmaking. WB had admitted to the point that they were going to make formula films. Like, they admitted that they had, like, a fucking production calculator that was determined to decide how they were going to take risks going forward.
Yeah. And like
You don't see stuff like this anymore that is I don't know, it's charming. When was the last time what was that charming film that you saw that wasn't by, like, a really small company, a really low budget thing?
yeah,
Or
honestly,
foreign. Like, no, I'm sorry, Studio Ghibli, just no, you can't.
I mean, honestly, I'm struggling to come up with something that isn't like an older movie already.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, with like Disney, the only thing that's allowed to take any risk now is the Marvel stuff. Now that they're post Endgame, it's like,
Mhm.
well, at this point, everything we do prints money anyway. So yeah, go make something weird like WandaVision or Loki.
And in making WandaVision and Loki, what they've basically said is, "Oh, hey, you know what? By the way, now there's a multiverse." What they did is they got out an entire cinematic universe worth of content for the people who would get pissed off by multiple versions or characters dying and coming back or all that typical
Yeah.
character nonsense.
but at the same time indoctrinate all those people so that when they do it, they'll be like, oh, this is more
Uh-huh.
of this. I'm gonna love it.
Uh-huh. Like Disney, it's not so much that I appreciate the art they made. I appreciate their fucking dedication to just getting as much money out of us and as much like emotional like grab, like just the nostalgia pool, just
Yeah.
weaponizing and monetizing nostalgia. Fucking Disney does it better than no other.
Yeah. And like the last movie to come out of them that wasn't like something that was like a sure thing that I was like surprised they did was Tron
Yeah.
Legacy. And like that movie really worked for me. Like I was not a Tron fan, like of that original movie. Like I had never seen it before that
Mm-hmm.
sequel came out, but Tron Legacy is one of my favorite movies, and I would much rather take another Tron movie other than just like another Marvel movie or like Disney live action.
Yeah, I really find myself more interested in things that are a little bit less realistic, more surreal, avant-garde, you know, just interesting and colorful and not like dark and gritty and woo, it's the post-apocalyptic, and because I don't want to be reminded of the fucking real world. God, like
Yeah.
This Is Us, I really enjoyed the show.
That's that
It
Amazon
did
show.
it's I don't know, one of the major networks. Well, I'm not gonna say I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the first couple of seasons, and then it was enjoyable, and then they added COVID, and I'm like, "No, I watch TV for
Yeah.
escape.
I was
Give me
really
escape."
hoping most things would like avoid that in their shows and stuff.
But a lot of places didn't.
Yeah. And I've heard some did it well, like that Superstore show I hear is really good. I've
Yeah,
not watched it, but
yeah.
like it's escapism. That's what I'm here for. And so
Mhm.
yeah, I guess this is escapism at its best.
It really is. It really is. And I think if you go into it with that kind of a mindset, like if you go into it with understanding, it is escapism. It is Most of the movie is a dream sequence and follows dream sequence logic and is on top of that satire of people that are rich and pirate operas from the 19th century.
Yeah.
It's such a
Um
ridiculous thing, you know?
it is. And maybe if I had encountered a lot more of this kind of stuff growing up, it would have hit me a
Hmm.
little different.
Yeah.
But having not seen a ton of old pirate movies and being unfamiliar with Pirates of Penzance, like I did walk away from it a little bit like, oh, well, I'm glad you like it type
Yep.
thing. But like there are things to appreciate about it.
Yep.
And
Well, I'm glad you can
very,
see that.
very, the best way to show that is to just go look at the YouTube comments on the YouTube video.
Yeah.
First of all, like every one I saw was positive,
Yeah.
but one of the ones I have pulled up here is YouTube led me here. I have never ever heard of this movie. It was the most hilariously ridiculous movie I've ever seen. It's a shame they don't make genius movies like this anymore.
Yeah. I really think I've commented this. This is like a premonition that I have. When I was a kid, I really like a lot of the movies that I saw were like I didn't actually scratch that, and you can edit this out because this is kind of like a mess of a thought. One of the things that is interesting to me about TikTok is you're giving people as young as 13 or even younger, but by terms and conditions 13, access to one of the most robust and easy to use video editors that I have ever seen. And in doing that, you are making people realize what editing can be used to do.
Some of these young people are doing insane things in there.
Yes. And you're also making people realize that content does not need to be visually high quality to be good or interesting or worth watching. And it's setting it I honestly think that when Gen Z is making films, that we're going to see stuff that is more like this, more like Mel Brooks stuff. It's a little bit more surreal, that where the editing is more visible. Because editors on YouTube are actually becoming popular in their own right. Like people recognize them. People recognize when a YouTuber has a good editor, when they are a good editor, when an editing technique is good and adds to the overall flavor. kids are learning how to use these techniques to make their own content better. And I think what they're going to be left with is a sense of disappointment when they go see movies like The Lighthouse. I we were supposed to watch The Lighthouse for Palate Cleanser. Seth and Jesse had wanted to watch it with me, and I watched it and I backed out at the last minute because objectively I understand that The Lighthouse is a good film and it's done extraordinarily well, and literally every film masterpiece technique that you can hit on, you can hit on, but
Mm-hmm.
it's so predictable to me. The form is just so consistent the entire way through for the most part. There are some parts where it changes, but like I want to see things that are like I want to see form really be experimented with. I want to see fourth wall breaks. I want to see visible editing. I want to see some of the stuff that's being done with TV series is like Loki, where they're doing like super low angles and oblique angles and things like that you don't normally see as much anymore because everything is just fucking like more realistic, it feels.
I never thought something like the
Guardians
pirate.
of the Galaxy in space, it's like we're gonna follow the 180-degree rule, and the camera is most likely gonna be like in the same orientation the entire time. Why? What is the reason for that? One of the funnest things Luca did was there's this scene where Luca jumps out of the water and he does a flip in the air, and they like slow-mo, and you see his perspective, and the camera tumbles, and do shit like that. Jesus, do something interesting with your fucking technology, people. Sorry, this is a rant about things
No, it's
entirely unrelated.
fine. It's not though, and it's interesting that a movie like the pirate movie would
Mhm.
bring out such deep thoughts.
Yes. And I think that's why I wanted to bring it on, because I had a feeling that if you could at least see value in it and could see that it was trying to do something, that we could have a good discussion about it, because the things that it is trying to do are things that more films should try to do.
Yeah, and
But
I certainly see the value, even if it wasn't
yeah.
for me. Like I
Mhm.
totally watch this like, oh, I understand why, you like it,
Yeah.
even though it wasn't something that I liked.
Yeah. And you know what? If you decide like tomorrow that you're going to go watch a bunch of like 1970s swashbuckling films, and then you end up seeing Pirates of Penzance, you may see this film later and have a completely different opinion. Or you may see it again
Yeah,
after just
absolutely.
talking. And I
Like
think that's one of the things that's fascinating to me about cinema is how like some movies like this, 17 years I think it's been that I've known this movie exists, and I still I feel more heartwarming to it today than I did before. And then there's other films that I loved when I was a kid that are objectively way better movies than this, that I'm like, I mean, there's just not as much value to it anymore.
yeah, no, I can totally understand that. And it was a really fascinating point you brought on about like the TikTok generation and the relationship to this movie, and be like the point that, yeah, something doesn't need to be perfect and pristine and polished to really have value to it.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's a great thought.
I think that's a good place to end too. I think that's all my
Yeah, it
thoughts.
is.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so well, I want to thank you for being my first return guest.
Yay!
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I knew that this was going to be a hard sell, especially if you did not like any of the things that it was based off and were never a teenage girl. Um, so I wanted to make sure that I had actually brought a good objective movie that I was pretty sure you would enjoy before I brought this one, and I'm glad we did it that way.
Yeah. This is maybe definitely not the one to jump headfirst into.
Yeah, and I have a feeling this is the movie that I like. That's my hill that I will die on, that I feel like this movie deserves to be more of a cult classic. But I have a feeling that I'll be back because I really like this. I like this format.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You can always come back whenever you want. You can always just pitch a
Yay.
movie to me. That's great.
Phenomenal.
Always looking for more guests. So, and you already got a head start on most guested guest. So,
Yeah.
or guest with most appearance is probably a better way to say that. But yeah, so do you wanna plug your stuff before we get out of
Cool.
here?
Awesome. Hi, my name is Aerin Moriarty. Actually, hold on a second. When is this going to be releasing?
I honestly could not tell you. I would just go with kind of general stuff right now because I haven't
Okay,
worked out the
perfect.
schedule yet.
Hi, my
Early
name
August,
is
I'll say that.
Hi, my name is Aerin Moriarty. Yeah, oh my god. Hi, my name is Aerin Moriarty. I primarily do film podcasts. I do the Film Rescue Show, where we take movies that suck and or movies that have areas of opportunity and we fix them. I may actually do the pirate movie on Film Rescue Show one of these days, but we would actually have to have people want to listen to that episode. I'm not sure we need that. We have that yet. We
Are
also
the
have
others familiar with this movie?
no, you were the second person in that whole sphere of people that I've shown this movie. Most people like don't put through this film.
Now I think they
Um,
have to cover it.
yeah, I know. Then we have the Palate Cleanser podcast, which was literally the palate cleanser from Film Rescue Show. We talk about movies that we're very nostalgic about that are objectively good, but often underrated. Not always, but some of them are like things like Hugo, some of them are things like The Matrix. Just, a wide variety of movies. Also, I have a show that is focused on the Marvel series Loki. It is a queer slash filmmaking take. So even though that show is probably over by now, it is still relevant. We take a look at a lot of the filmmaking techniques and we also look at queer theories. That's called Loki Sucks Dick. If you want to follow me specifically, my name is Aerin Moriarty. I'm at Aerin Moriarty YT on Instagram and Twitter.
All right. Well, thank you for coming here and introducing probably a bunch of people to this movie who have never heard of it.
Yeah, I'm really I'm very curious how this episode is going to be received, and I'm going to see how many more comments are on it on YouTube and all that jazz, and how we go.
Oh yeah, definitely dive through the YouTube comments on it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've
People
actually never read them.
unapologetically love this movie.
Yeah, I was afraid that I was going to get pissed at people and rage in the comments.
Oh no, it's I didn't scroll through all of them, but every one that I did see was very positive.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah. So thank you, Aerin, for stopping
Thank
by
you.
for your second time, and we will for sure have you back. And I just want to thank everybody else for listening and go check out the pirate movie.